I'm Emma Richardson, and I never thought my brother's wife would shove me to the ground in front of dozens of witnesses while screaming that I was a pathetic failure who didn't deserve the life I had. What she didn't know was that my husband Daniel owns half the tech companies in Denver, and when he saw the security footage of her attacking me, he made one phone call that changed everything. The woman who thought she could destroy me because she was jealous of my success was about to learn what real power looks like. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The autumn leaves crunched beneath my heels as I walked through downtown Denver, my breath visible in the crisp October air. At 29, I had everything I'd ever dreamed of, and more. My marketing firm was thriving, representing some of the most innovative tech startups in Colorado. My penthouse overlooked the Rocky Mountains, and every morning I woke up next to Daniel, the love of my life, who happened to be one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the state. But none of that mattered as much as the phone call I was about to make to my brother Tyler. Tyler and I had been inseparable since childhood. Despite our 3-year age gap, we'd navigated every major life event together. When our parents went through their rough patch during our teenage years, Tyler became my anchor. When I struggled through my first year of college, questioning whether I was smart enough to succeed in business, Tyler drove 4 hours every weekend just to study with me in the library. When I met Daniel at a tech conference 5 years ago and was terrified I wasn't sophisticated enough for someone of his caliber, Tyler spent hours on the phone convincing me that any man would be lucky to have me in his life. Our bond had only strengthened when Tyler became a high school English teacher 3 years ago. While I built my career in the fast-paced world of marketing and tech, Tyler found his calling inspiring teenagers to love literature. We couldn't have chosen more different paths, but our values remained aligned. Family came first, always. Hard work mattered more than luck. Success meant nothing if you forgot where you came from. Every Sunday for the past 5 years, we'd maintained our sacred tradition. Family dinner alternated between our parents' ranch-style home in Aurora and my penthouse downtown. Tyler would arrive with lesson plans tucked under his arm and stories about his students that made everyone laugh until their sides ached. I'd share the latest drama from my clients, and Daniel would quietly listen, occasionally offering insights that reminded us all why he'd built a software empire from his college dorm room. The dynamic had been perfect until Jessica entered the picture 18 months ago. Tyler met her at a coffee shop near the school where he taught. She was working as a barista, claiming it was temporary while she built her interior design business. From Tyler's first description, I could tell he was smitten. She was beautiful, charming, and seemed genuinely interested in his passion for teaching. When he brought her to Sunday dinner for the first time, I made every effort to welcome her warmly. Jessica was undeniably striking, tall and willowy, with perfectly styled blonde hair and an expensive taste in clothing that seemed inconsistent with a barista's salary. She spoke confidently about her design work, dropping names of wealthy Aspen clients and describing elaborate renovation projects. Something felt rehearsed about her stories, but I attributed my skepticism to protective sister instincts. Tyler deserved happiness after his devastating breakup with his college girlfriend 2 years earlier. As months passed, Jessica's presence at family dinners became routine. She was unfailingly polite, always bringing a bottle of wine or dessert, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know our family. Our parents adored her immediately. She remembered details about Dad's golf game and helped Mom with dishes without being asked. Tyler glowed whenever she spoke, clearly proud to have such a sophisticated girlfriend. The engagement announcement came exactly 1 year after they met. Tyler called me on a Tuesday evening, his voice bubbling with excitement. He'd proposed during a weekend trip to Estes Park, he explained, and Jessica had said yes immediately. They were planning a small ceremony within 6 months because, as Jessica had explained, when you know, you know. I congratulated Tyler enthusiastically, while a familiar knot formed in my stomach. The timeline felt rushed, but Tyler was 32 and mature enough to make his own decisions. The wedding took place at a charming venue in the foothills outside Denver. Jessica looked radiant in a designer gown that must have cost more than Tyler's monthly salary. During the reception, I watched my brother's face shine with pure joy as he danced with his new wife. Daniel squeezed my hand and whispered that he'd never seen Tyler so happy. I pushed aside my lingering concerns and focused on celebrating this new chapter in my brother's life. The first few months of Tyler and Jessica's marriage passed smoothly. They settled into their modest suburban home in Lakewood, a cozy 3-bedroom ranch that Tyler had purchased with his teacher's salary and careful savings. Jessica claimed to be expanding her design business, often mentioning client meetings and site visits that kept her busy during the day. Sunday dinners continued as usual, with Jessica fitting seamlessly into our family rhythm. The shift began subtly in late spring. Jessica started making small comments about the contrast between Tyler's life and mine. During one Sunday dinner at my penthouse, she marveled at the floor-to-ceiling windows and high-end furniture, noting how different it must be to worry about money when you had unlimited resources. The comments were delivered with preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The smile. But something sharp lay beneath the surface. Tyler began changing in small ways that only someone who knew him intimately would notice. He'd always been animated when telling stories, his hands moving expressively as he painted vivid pictures of his students' achievements or funny classroom moments. Now he sat straighter, his gestures more controlled, occasionally glancing at Jessica as if checking for approval. When our parents asked about their plans for summer vacation, Jessica answered before Tyler could speak, explaining that they needed to be practical about expenses given their budget constraints. The pattern intensified over the following weeks. Jessica began steering conversations away from topics that highlighted the differences in our lifestyles. When Daniel mentioned a weekend trip we'd taken to Napa Valley, Jessica quickly changed the subject to Tyler's summer school teaching assignment. When I shared exciting news about landing a major client, Jessica smiled tightly and commented on how fortunate I was to have such opportunities fall into my lap. More concerning was how Jessica had begun monitoring Tyler's communication with me. Our tradition of quick check-in calls during the week dwindled to brief text exchanges. When I suggested lunch, just the two of us to catch up properly, Tyler explained that he and Jessica were trying to do everything together as newlyweds. The brother who had once called me multiple times a week to share random thoughts or funny stories now seemed to require scheduling and Jessica's implicit approval for any interaction. During one particularly tense Sunday dinner at our parents' house, Jessica made a comment that crystallized my growing unease. Tyler was describing a breakthrough moment with a struggling student who had finally connected with a Shakespeare sonnet. His face lit up as he explained how the student's entire perspective on poetry had shifted in that single moment. Jessica placed her hand over his and said sweetly, "Honey, you know how your teaching stories can go on forever. Maybe save some room for other conversations." The comment stung because it dismissed something Tyler was passionate about, but it was delivered with such apparent affection that calling it out would have seemed petty. Tyler immediately shifted gears, asking Jessica about her latest design project instead. I caught my mother's subtle frown and realized I wasn't the only one noticing these dynamics. My concerns deepened when Tyler's longtime friend Marcus mentioned, during a chance encounter at the grocery store, that Tyler had canceled their monthly poker night indefinitely. According to Marcus, Jessica felt that married men should prioritize couple time over boys' nights. When I brought this up with Tyler during a rare phone conversation, he brushed off my concern, explaining that marriage required compromises and adjustments. The breaking point came during what would become our last normal family dinner together. We'd gathered at my penthouse on a beautiful Sunday evening in late August. Daniel was grilling steaks on our terrace while I prepared sides in the kitchen. Our parents were relaxing with glasses of wine, and the atmosphere should have been perfect. Tyler seemed more subdued than usual, checking his phone frequently and appearing distracted. When Jessica excused herself to use the restroom, I seized the opportunity for a private moment with my brother. I pulled him aside on the terrace and gently asked if everything was okay. He looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes that I hadn't noticed before. For just a moment, his careful composure slipped, and I saw a flash of the old Tyler, vulnerable and uncertain. He started to say something, then stopped abruptly as Jessica returned from inside. She immediately joined us on the terrace, slipping her arm through Tyler's possessively. "What are we talking about out here?" she asked with a bright smile that didn't reach her eyes. Tyler mumbled something about work stress and the moment was lost. The rest of the evening proceeded with surface-level pleasantries, but I could feel the tension radiating from my brother. That night, after our parents and Tyler and Jessica had left, I voiced my concerns to Daniel. We sat in our living room, the city lights twinkling below us, as I struggled to articulate what I was seeing. Daniel listened carefully, his businessman's mind processing the patterns I described. "It sounds like she's isolating him," he said finally. "Classic controlling behavior. The question is whether Tyler recognizes what's happening." Daniel's observation validated my instincts, but it also highlighted the delicate position I was in. How do you tell someone you love that their spouse is manipulating them? How do you express concern without seeming jealous or interfering? Tyler had always been independent and strong-willed. The idea that he could be controlled seemed impossible, yet the evidence was mounting. I decided to do some discreet research. Jessica's claims about her interior design business had always seemed vague, with client names that didn't quite add up, and project descriptions that lacked specific details. Using my professional network and some careful online investigation, I began checking her credentials. The boutique design firm she claimed to own had no website, no business registration, and no online presence whatsoever. The high-end Aspen clients she frequently mentioned had no record of working with anyone by her name. More troubling was what I discovered about her background. Jessica claimed to have grown up in Aspen, the daughter of successful real estate developers. However, public records showed she'd actually grown up in Grand Junction, a working-class city on Colorado's western slope. Her parents weren't wealthy developers, but a retired factory worker and a part-time retail clerk. The expensive tastes and sophisticated background were fabricated, designed to make her seem more compatible with Tyler's educated, middle-class family. The lies weren't necessarily deal-breakers, but they painted a picture of someone who was comfortable with deception. Combined with Tyler's obvious changes in behavior and Jessica's increasing control over his social interactions, I began to worry that my brother was in a potentially harmful relationship. But approaching him directly had failed, and I knew that pushing too hard might drive him away completely. My opportunity came when Jessica made a critical error. During a casual conversation with my friend Mia, who worked as a graphic designer for several local businesses, I learned that Jessica had been asking questions about Daniel's company and our personal finances. According to Mia, Jessica had approached her at a coffee shop, claiming she was working on a design project for a tech executive and needed to understand the typical lifestyle and spending patterns of successful entrepreneurs in Denver. The conversation struck Mia as odd because Jessica had been vague about which client she was working for and seemed more interested in specific details about Daniel's properties and business dealings than general industry insights. When Mia mentioned that she knew me personally, Jessica's questions had become even more pointed, focusing on our marriage, how we'd met, and whether Daniel had any family money beyond his business success. This crossed a line that I couldn't ignore. Whatever issues Tyler and Jessica might be having in their marriage, involving my husband's business and financial situation, was completely inappropriate. It suggested that Jessica's interest in our family might extend beyond simple social dynamics to something more calculating and potentially dangerous. I knew I had to act, but I also knew that any direct confrontation would likely backfire. Jessica had proven herself skilled at manipulation and emotional warfare. A direct accusation would give her the opportunity to twist the situation, making me appear jealous or controlling while positioning herself as the victim of an interfering sister-in-law. Instead, I decided to document everything I'd discovered and present the information to Tyler in a way that allowed him to draw his own conclusions. I compiled the inconsistencies in Jessica's background, the concerning questions she'd been asking about our finances, and the pattern of controlling behaviors I'd observed. My hope was that seeing everything laid out objectively might help Tyler recognize what was happening in his marriage. The conversation I'd been dreading finally arrived on a crisp September evening. Tyler called and asked if we could meet for coffee, just the two of us. His voice carried a weight that I hadn't heard since our teenage years, when he'd confided his fears about our parents' marriage troubles. We arranged to meet at Mountain View Cafe in Cherry Creek, a quiet spot where we'd had many important conversations over the years. Tyler arrived looking haggard, his usually neat appearance disheveled, and his eyes carrying the same exhaustion I'd noticed weeks earlier. He ordered his usual Americano but left it untouched as he struggled to find words. Finally, he looked up and said, "Emma, I think I need to tell you something about Jessica. Something I probably should have told you months ago." Tyler's hands trembled slightly as he wrapped them around his coffee cup, seeking warmth that had nothing to do with the temperature. The confession that had been building for months finally spilled out in a torrent of words that painted a picture far more disturbing than even my worst suspicions had suggested. "It started small," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "Little comments about how I could improve myself, how I could be more successful like you and Daniel. At first, I thought she was being supportive, pushing me to reach my potential. She'd suggest I dress differently for school, speak more confidently in social situations, maybe consider moving to a private school where the salary would be better." The Tyler I knew had always been confident in his career choice. Teaching wasn't just a job for him, it was a calling. He'd turned down more lucrative opportunities in corporate training and educational consulting because he believed in the power of inspiring young minds in the public school system. Hearing that Jessica had been undermining his professional confidence felt like a personal attack on everything my brother stood for. "Then she started monitoring my interactions with you," Tyler continued, his eyes fixed on the untouched coffee. "She'd want to know exactly what we talked about, why you called, what we discussed during family dinners. If I mentioned something about your work or Daniel's company, she'd get this look. Not angry exactly, but calculating. Like she was filing away information for later use." My heart ached as Tyler described how Jessica had gradually inserted herself into every aspect of his life. She'd convinced him to change his phone plan to a family account that she managed, giving her access to all his call and text logs. She'd suggested they combine their social media accounts to present a united front as a married couple, effectively monitoring all his online interactions. Most insidiously, she'd begun managing their finances completely, claiming it was more efficient for one person to handle all the bills and budgeting. "I know how this sounds," Tyler said, finally looking up to meet my eyes. "I know it sounds like I'm weak or stupid for letting it happen, but it was so gradual, Emma. Each change seemed reasonable in isolation. She always had logical explanations that made me feel foolish for questioning her." The manipulation had extended to their most intimate moments. Jessica had convinced Tyler that successful couples shared everything, including passwords, email accounts, and personal correspondence. She'd positioned this level of access as proof of their trust and commitment, making Tyler feel guilty for wanting any privacy. When he'd hesitated to give her access to his work email, she'd cried and accused him of having something to hide. "She reads everything," Tyler admitted, his voice cracking with shame. "Every email from you, every text from our parents, every communication with my friends. She claims it's because she wants to be involved in my life, but I've started to feel like I can't have a private thought without her knowing about it." The financial control was perhaps the most concerning aspect of Jessica's manipulation. Tyler had always been careful with money, living within his teacher's salary and saving consistently for the future. Jessica had convinced him to move their savings into an account that only she could access, claiming it would earn better interest. She'd also persuaded him to add her name to his retirement account and life insurance policy, framing it as responsible financial planning for married couples. "I wanted to talk to you about it months ago," Tyler said, tears beginning to form in his eyes. "But every time I considered calling you, she'd somehow know. She'd make comments about how some people can't handle their siblings being happy, or how family members sometimes try to sabotage marriages out of jealousy. She never said it was about you directly, but the implication was clear. Jessica's psychological warfare had been masterful in its subtlety. She'd never explicitly forbidden Tyler from contacting me or spending time with our family. Instead, she'd created an atmosphere where any interaction with his support system felt like a betrayal of their marriage. She'd reward Tyler with affection and attention when he chose her over family commitments, and withdraw emotionally when he prioritized anyone else. The revelation that had finally opened Tyler's eyes had come by accident. While helping Jessica organize their home office, Tyler had discovered a notebook filled with detailed observations about our family. Jessica had been documenting our conversations, noting Daniel's business connections, tracking our social activities, and even recording the approximate value of gifts we'd given for birthdays and holidays. She had pages of notes about Daniel's company, Tyler said, his voice filled with disgust. Revenue estimates, employee counts, details about his business partnerships. She'd even researched your penthouse and had estimates of what it was worth. There were notes about your jewelry, your car, even speculation about your investment portfolio. The notebook had also contained character assessments of each family member, written in clinical language that reduced Tyler's loved ones to potential assets or obstacles. Our parents were described as easily manipulated through emotional appeals and potential source of emergency funds. I was characterized as primary threat due to influence over Tyler and, quote, access point to significant wealth through marriage. Most chilling were Jessica's future plans, outlined in meticulous detail. She intended to gradually separate Tyler from our family entirely, positioning herself as his only source of emotional support. Once that isolation was complete, she planned to convince Tyler to make significant financial decisions that would benefit her long-term security. The notebook referenced other men she'd dated previously, suggesting a pattern of targeting financially stable partners for exploitation. I confronted her about the notebook, Tyler said, his hands now visibly shaking. She went completely cold, Emma, like a switch had been flipped. She told me that successful women always researched their partner's family and financial situation for protection. She said you and Daniel probably had detailed files on her too, and that I was naive for not understanding how wealthy people operate. When Tyler had pressed the issue, Jessica had turned the situation around completely. She'd accused him of violating her privacy by snooping through her personal belongings. She'd claimed the notebook was actually research for a potential design client who had requested information about successful Denver families for a magazine article. Most manipulatively, she'd broken down in tears and accused Tyler of looking for reasons to end their marriage because he'd never really loved her. She threatened to leave, Tyler whispered. Said she could see that I was more loyal to my family than to my wife, and that she couldn't stay in a marriage where she wasn't the priority. Part of me felt relieved at the thought of her leaving, but another part was terrified. She'd made herself so central to my life that I couldn't imagine functioning without her input on every decision. The emotional manipulation had been followed by a period of intense love bombing. Jessica had become the perfect wife for several weeks, cooking Tyler's favorite meals, showing interest in his work, and being exceptionally affectionate. She'd apologized tearfully for the notebook, claiming it was a remnant of past relationship trauma that made her feel insecure about her place in our family. The intermittent reinforcement had been perfectly calculated to keep Tyler off balance and grateful for her attention. I know I need to get out, Tyler said, finally taking a sip of his cold coffee and grimacing. But I don't know how. She's integrated herself into every aspect of my life. She handles our finances, manages our social calendar, even decides what we eat for dinner. I feel like I've forgotten how to make independent decisions. The admission broke my heart. The confident, capable brother I'd always admired had been systematically stripped of his autonomy. Jessica had identified his deepest insecurities about his modest income and social status, then exploited those vulnerabilities to make him dependent on her validation and guidance. Tyler, you're not weak or stupid, I said firmly. You're dealing with someone who has clearly done this before. The notebook proves she's been calculating and deliberate about every step of this process. This isn't about your judgment or character. This is about someone who targeted you specifically because of your good qualities. We talked for nearly 3 hours that evening, with Tyler gradually opening up about other concerning incidents he'd rationalized or forgotten. Jessica had been systematically isolating him from his support network while positioning herself as indispensable to his daily functioning. She'd also been gathering information that could potentially be used to damage our family's reputation or financial security. As we prepared to leave the coffee shop, Tyler made me promise not to confront Jessica directly or involve Daniel in the situation immediately. He was terrified that any aggressive action would prompt Jessica to accelerate her timeline or retaliate in ways that could harm his career or our family. I agreed reluctantly, understanding his fear, but also knowing that Jessica's behavior was escalating towards something potentially dangerous. I need time to figure out how to extricate myself safely, Tyler said as we hugged goodbye in the parking lot. She has access to everything in my life, Emma. My bank accounts, my work email, even my medical records. If I move too quickly or make her suspicious, I don't know what she might do. The drive home to my penthouse felt surreal. The Denver skyline glittered against the mountains, a familiar sight that usually brought me comfort. Instead, I felt nauseated thinking about how Jessica had been watching our family like a predator studying prey. The woman who'd shared our Sunday dinners and holiday celebrations had been documenting our lives for her own twisted purposes. Daniel was waiting for me when I arrived home, having sensed from my earlier text that the conversation with Tyler had been serious. I filled him in on everything Tyler had revealed, watching my husband's expression grow increasingly grim as the scope of Jessica's deception became clear. "She's been conducting corporate espionage on our family," Daniel said when I finished recounting the evening. "The level of detail you're describing goes beyond curiosity or even garden-variety gold-digging. This sounds like someone with experience in financial fraud or identity theft." Daniel's business success had taught him to recognize patterns of predatory behavior. He'd dealt with competitors who'd tried to infiltrate his company through romantic relationships with employees. And he'd seen how sophisticated modern scam artists could be. Jessica's methods were textbook examples of long-term financial manipulation. "We need to protect Tyler, but we also need to protect ourselves," Daniel said. "If she's been gathering detailed information about our finances and business connections, she could potentially use that information to harm us professionally or personally." The next morning, Daniel quietly arranged for a comprehensive security audit of our personal and business accounts. He also hired a private investigator to conduct a thorough background check on Jessica, wanting to understand the full scope of what we were dealing with. The results would take several days, but Daniel suspected we'd find evidence of previous victims or ongoing fraudulent activities. Meanwhile, I struggled with respecting Tyler's request for patience while watching him suffer under Jessica's continued manipulation. Over the following weeks, I noticed that he looked increasingly exhausted during our limited interactions. Family dinners became tense affairs where Jessica dominated conversation and Tyler sat silently, occasionally shooting me meaningful looks that conveyed his growing desperation. The breakthrough came sooner than expected, but not in the way any of us had anticipated. Daniel's private investigator uncovered information that painted Jessica's deception in an even darker light than we'd imagined. Her real name was Jennifer Collins, and she had a criminal history spanning 3 states. The interior design business was completely fictional, created as cover for a sophisticated romance scam operation that had defrauded multiple victims over the past 5 years. Jennifer's method was always the same. She'd target professionally successful but emotionally vulnerable men, often those recovering from previous relationship trauma or dealing with family pressures. She'd create an elaborate false identity designed to appeal to each specific victim, then use a combination of love bombing and psychological manipulation to gain access to their finances and personal information. Her previous victims included a divorced lawyer in Phoenix who'd lost over $100,000 before discovering her deception, a recently widowed business owner in Salt Lake City who'd signed over his life insurance policy before his adult children intervened, and a lonely professor in Albuquerque who'd nearly lost his house before a colleague recognized Jennifer from a previous scam in another city. "She's not just manipulative," Daniel said, as we reviewed the investigator's report. "She's a career criminal who's perfected her technique over years of practice. Tyler isn't her first victim, and he won't be her last unless we stop her." The report also revealed that Jennifer had been using Tyler's identity to open credit accounts and take out small loans. She'd been careful to keep the amounts below levels that would trigger immediate attention, but the debt was accumulating steadily. Tyler's credit score had already begun to decline, and there were several accounts he wasn't even aware existed. "She's been setting him up for financial ruin," Daniel observed. "Even if he leaves her tomorrow, it'll take years to repair the damage she's already done to his credit and finances. And if he stays much longer, she'll probably escalate to larger fraudulent activities that could destroy his career and reputation." Armed with this information, I knew I couldn't wait for Tyler to find his own way out of the relationship. Jennifer was a professional predator who'd already begun the process of financially destroying my brother. Every day he remained married to her increased the potential damage to his future and our family's security. The decision to act came when Daniel's investigator discovered that Jennifer had recently made inquiries about Tyler's life insurance policy and had been researching the process for having someone declared mentally incompetent. The implications were terrifying. She wasn't just planning to leave Tyler financially ruined. She was potentially setting up scenarios that could put his physical safety at risk. "We have to tell him everything," I said to Daniel that night as we sat in our living room. The investigator's reports spread across our coffee table like evidence in a criminal case. He asked for time, but time is exactly what we don't have. She's escalating, and every day we wait gives her more opportunity to cause irreversible damage. Daniel agreed, but he also recognized the delicate nature of the situation. Tyler was already psychologically fragmented from months of manipulation. Overwhelming him with evidence of Jennifer's criminal history could push him into complete emotional breakdown. We needed to present the information carefully, with support systems in place to help Tyler process the magnitude of his situation. "Let me handle the legal aspects," Daniel suggested. "I'll have Patricia prepare documentation for identity theft protection and credit repair. We'll also want to explore options for annulling the marriage based on fraud." The sooner Tyler can distance himself legally from Jennifer, the better protected he'll be from her ongoing schemes. The next morning, I called Tyler and asked him to meet me for lunch. I could hear the strain in his voice as he agreed, mentioning that Jessica was out for the day at a supposed client meeting. The irony wasn't lost on me that Tyler could only meet with his own sister when his wife was absent, but I was grateful for the opportunity to speak with him privately. We met at a quiet restaurant in downtown Denver, far from Jessica's usual haunts. Tyler looked even worse than he had during our coffee shop conversation weeks earlier. He'd lost weight, his clothes hung loosely on his frame, and there were dark circles under his eyes that suggested he wasn't sleeping well. "It's gotten worse," Tyler said without preamble once we'd ordered our food. "She's been asking me to sign papers she claims are for tax purposes or insurance updates. When I try to read them carefully, she gets impatient and tells me I don't trust her. Last week, she wanted me to sign something that would give her power of attorney over my medical decisions. The revelation confirmed our worst fears. Jennifer was moving quickly to gain legal control over Tyler's life, positioning herself to make decisions about his healthcare, finances, and potentially his freedom. The power of attorney document was particularly alarming because it would have given her the ability to have Tyler committed to psychiatric care if she claimed he was mentally unstable. "Tyler, I need to share some information with you," I said gently. "It's going to be difficult to hear, but you need to know what we're really dealing with." Over the next hour, I carefully presented the evidence Daniel's investigator had uncovered. I started with Jennifer's real identity and criminal history, then moved through her previous victims and current fraudulent activities. Tyler's face went through a series of emotions as the scope of his situation became clear. Disbelief, anger, shame, and finally a kind of hollow recognition. "I'm such an idiot," Tyler said when I finished, his head in his hands. "How did I not see this? How did I let someone completely destroy my life without even realizing it was happening?" "Because she's a professional," I replied firmly. "She's had years to perfect these techniques on other victims." "You're not stupid, Tyler. You're a good person who trusted someone who presented herself as worthy of that trust. The fact that you were vulnerable doesn't make you responsible for her criminal behavior." Tyler was quiet for a long time, processing the information. When he finally looked up, there was a spark of the old Tyler in his eyes, a hint of the strength and determination that had carried him through previous challenges in his life. "What do I do now?" he asked. "How do I get out of this safely?" The question marked a turning point in Tyler's journey from victim to survivor. For the first time in months, he was ready to take action to protect himself and reclaim his life. But we all knew that Jennifer wouldn't let go of her investment in Tyler easily. The most dangerous phase of our battle against her manipulation was just beginning. The strategy session took place in Daniel's home office the following evening, with Patricia Walsh joining us via secure video conference. As Daniel's personal attorney and one of Denver's most formidable legal minds, Patricia had handled everything from corporate acquisitions to high-stakes divorce cases. Her sharp eyes and no-nonsense demeanor immediately put Tyler at ease, despite the intimidating circumstances. "The first priority is protecting Tyler's identity and finances," Patricia explained, her voice crisp and professional through the laptop speakers. "We need to freeze all joint accounts, cancel any credit cards she has access to, and implement identity monitoring services immediately. Every hour we delay gives Jennifer more opportunity to cause lasting damage." Patricia had already begun preparing the necessary paperwork based on the investigators' findings. The legal strategy was complex, involving multiple jurisdictions where Jennifer had committed fraud. But Patricia's experience with financial crimes made her uniquely qualified to navigate the challenges ahead. "The marriage itself can likely be annulled based on fraudulent identity," Patricia continued. "Jennifer Collins doesn't legally exist. The marriage license was obtained under false pretenses, which invalidates the entire union. However, we need to be strategic about timing. If we move too quickly, she might flee or escalate her criminal activities." Tyler listened intently as Patricia outlined the legal framework for his escape from Jennifer's manipulation. For the first time in months, he had advocates who understood the complexity of his situation and possessed the resources to fight back effectively. The relief on his face was palpable, though tempered by the realization of how much damage had already been done. "What about the debts she's created in my name?" Tyler asked, his voice tight with anxiety. "I had no idea those accounts existed until Emma showed me the credit report. Some of those balances are higher than my annual salary." Patricia's expression softened slightly, the first hint of compassion breaking through her professional facade. "Identity theft victims aren't responsible for fraudulent debts, but the process of proving fraud can be lengthy and complicated. We'll need detailed documentation of everything Jennifer has done, which is why the investigator's report is so valuable." The conversation shifted to the immediate logistics of Tyler's situation. He was still living in the house with Jennifer, sleeping in the same bed, maintaining the facade of their marriage while secretly planning his escape. The psychological toll was enormous, but Patricia emphasized the importance of not alerting Jennifer to their investigation until all protective measures were in place. "She's a flight risk," Patricia warned. "Career criminals like Jennifer often have exit strategies prepared. If she suspects we're onto her, she might disappear overnight, taking whatever assets she can liquidate and leaving Tyler to deal with the financial wreckage alone." Daniel had been quietly taking notes throughout the conversation, his businessman's mind processing the tactical challenges ahead. "What if we set up surveillance on her activities? If she's still actively committing fraud, catching her in the act might strengthen our legal case." Patricia nodded approvingly. "I was thinking the same thing. We need evidence of her current criminal activities, not just her past victims. If we can document her accessing Tyler's accounts without permission, or using his identity for fraudulent purposes, we'll have ironclad cases for both criminal prosecution and civil recovery." The surveillance operation began the next day, with Daniel's investigator coordinating with Patricia's forensic accountants to monitor Jennifer's movements and financial activities. Tyler provided access to his accounts and devices, allowing the team to track every transaction and communication in real time. What they discovered exceeded even our worst expectations. Jennifer had been operating an entire network of fraudulent identities, using Tyler's information as just one component of a sophisticated financial scheme. She'd created fake businesses, filed false tax returns, and even applied for government benefits, using stolen personal information for multiple victims. "She's been using your social security number to establish credit histories for at least 3 different fake identities," Patricia explained during an emergency meeting 2 days later. "The scope of fraud is staggering. We're not dealing with a simple romance scam anymore. This is organized financial crime at a professional level." Tyler looked physically ill as Patricia detailed the extent of Jennifer's criminal enterprise. His modest teacher's salary had been leveraged into hundreds of thousands of dollars in fraudulent debt, spread across dozens of accounts he'd never seen. The complexity of the scheme would require months of legal work to untangle, even with the best attorneys and forensic specialists. "How is this possible?" Tyler asked, his voice hollow with shock. "How did I not notice any of this happening?" "Because she's an expert at compartmentalizing her activities," the investigator explained. "She used different addresses for different identities, had mail forwarded to private mailboxes, and conducted most of her criminal activities during hours when you were at work. The psychological manipulation was designed to keep you distracted while she systematically exploited your identity. Daniel had been researching Jennifer's background independently, using his business connections to dig deeper into her history. What he'd discovered painted an even more disturbing picture of her capabilities and potential dangerousness. "She's not working alone," Daniel announced, entering the office with a thick folder of new documentation. "The investigator I hired in Phoenix tracked down her previous victim, the lawyer who lost $100,000. According to him, Jennifer was part of a larger organization specializing in long-term relationship fraud. They target specific demographics and share intelligence about potential victims." The revelation transformed our understanding of Tyler's situation completely. Jennifer wasn't a lone predator acting on impulse or opportunity. She was part of a criminal network with resources, connections, and years of experience in exploiting vulnerable targets. The notebook she'd kept about our family wasn't just personal curiosity, it was professional intelligence gathering for a larger operation. "They probably have detailed files on your entire family," Patricia said grimly. If Jennifer was feeding information to associates, they might have multiple people positioned to exploit different family members simultaneously. The possibility that other family members might be targeted sent chills through everyone in the room. Our parents, with their retirement accounts and trusting natures, would be particularly vulnerable to sophisticated financial manipulation. Even Daniel's business could be at risk if criminals had detailed intelligence about his operations and personal relationships. "We need to expand our protective measures immediately," Daniel decided. "I'm hiring security consultants to audit our parents' financial accounts and implement monitoring services for everyone in the family. If this is part of a larger criminal enterprise, we can't assume Tyler was their only target." The expanded investigation revealed the true scope of the threat we were facing. Jennifer's criminal network had been researching our family for over a year before she'd even met Tyler. They'd identified him as the most vulnerable access point to our family's resources, someone whose natural trust and desire for companionship made him susceptible to romantic manipulation. "They knew about your marriage to Daniel before Jennifer ever approached Tyler," the investigator explained. "The coffee shop meeting wasn't coincidental. They'd been tracking Tyler's routines for weeks, waiting for the perfect opportunity to initiate contact." The premeditation was breathtaking in its calculated cruelty. Tyler hadn't simply fallen victim to a opportunistic predator. He'd been deliberately targeted by professionals who'd studied his psychological profile and engineered his seduction with scientific precision. Every aspect of their relationship, from Jennifer's fabricated background to her manufactured personality traits, had been designed to exploit Tyler's specific vulnerabilities and desires. "She knew I'd been hurt by my previous breakup," Tyler said, his voice filled with disgust and self-recrimination. "She positioned herself as everything my ex-girlfriend wasn't. Understanding about my career, supportive of my relationship with family, interested in building a stable future together. It was all calculated manipulation based on intelligence they'd gathered about my personal history." Patricia reviewed the evidence methodically, building cases for both criminal prosecution and civil recovery. The challenge was coordinating with law enforcement agencies in multiple states while protecting Tyler from Jennifer's potential retaliation. If Jennifer suspected she was under investigation, she might accelerate her criminal activities or take actions to silence Tyler permanently. "The domestic violence aspect complicates everything," Patricia warned. "Psychological abuse victims often struggle to testify effectively against their abusers, especially when the abuse was subtle and long-term. Jennifer's defense team will try to portray Tyler as a willing participant who's now having buyer's remorse about his marriage." The legal strategy required careful choreography to maximize Tyler's protection while building the strongest possible case against Jennifer and her criminal network. Patricia recommended a coordinated approach involving federal authorities who had jurisdiction over interstate fraud and local prosecutors who could pursue domestic violence and identity theft charges. "We need Tyler to continue the charade for a few more days while we get all our pieces in place," Patricia explained. "I know it's difficult, but if Jennifer becomes suspicious now, she might destroy evidence or flee before we can build a complete case against her organization. Tyler agreed reluctantly, understanding the strategic necessity while struggling with the emotional toll of continued cohabitation with his abuser. Daniel arranged for discreet security monitoring of Tyler's house, ensuring that help would be immediately available if Jennifer became violent or threatening. The breakthrough came when Jennifer made a critical mistake. Confident that Tyler was completely under her control, she'd become careless about concealing her criminal activities. Daniel's forensic accountants discovered that she'd been using Tyler's work computer to access fraudulent accounts, leaving digital fingerprints that directly linked her to multiple identity theft schemes. She logged into fake business accounts from Tyler's school computer, Patricia announced during an emergency conference call. The IP address traces are irrefutable. We can prove she was conducting criminal activities using school district equipment, which adds federal charges for using educational institution resources for fraud. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Jennifer had been so confident in her psychological control over Tyler that she'd stopped taking basic precautions to conceal her criminal activities. Her arrogance had finally provided the ammunition needed to destroy her carefully constructed facade. "It's time to move," Patricia declared. "We have enough evidence to arrest Jennifer and freeze all her assets. Tyler needs to be removed from that house immediately, before she realizes what's happening." The extraction plan was coordinated like a military operation. Tyler would go to work normally, while a team of investigators and attorneys secured evidence from the house. Patricia had obtained emergency restraining orders and asset freezing injunctions, ensuring that Jennifer couldn't flee or liquidate Tyler's remaining assets when she realized her scheme had been exposed. "Are you ready for this?" Daniel asked Tyler the night before the operation was scheduled to begin. "Once we start, there's no going back. Jennifer will know that you've been working against her, and her reaction might be unpredictable." Tyler looked exhausted but determined, like a man who'd finally found the courage to fight for his freedom after months of psychological imprisonment. "I can't live like this anymore," he said simply. "Whatever happens, it has to be better than what I'm going through now." The morning of the operation, Tyler left for school as usual, carrying only his normal work materials to avoid arousing Jennifer's suspicions. He'd kissed her goodbye and told her he loved her, maintaining the deception one final time while knowing it would be the last lie he'd ever tell her. By 10 a.m., investigators were at the house with search warrants, while Patricia's team moved to freeze Jennifer's accounts and serve legal papers. The coordination was flawless, with every aspect of Jennifer's criminal enterprise targeted simultaneously to prevent her from escaping or retaliating. Jennifer's reaction when she realized what was happening revealed the true extent of her calculating nature. According to the investigators, she showed no emotion when confronted with evidence of her crimes. Instead, she immediately demanded to speak with an attorney and refused to answer any questions about her activities or associates. "She's a professional," the lead investigator reported to our team that afternoon. "No panic, no denials, no attempts to explain away the evidence. She went straight into damage control mode, which suggests she's been through this process before." The search of the house revealed the full scope of Jennifer's criminal operations. Hidden in a locked filing cabinet were detailed dossiers on dozens of potential victims, including comprehensive financial and psychological profiles. Our family's file was 3 inches thick, containing everything from property records to Daniel's business partnerships to our parents' retirement account statements. "She had backup plans for backup plans," Patricia observed, as she reviewed the seized documents. If Tyler hadn't worked out as a long-term victim, she had profiles prepared for at least 5 other targets in your social circle. This was industrial-scale predatory behavior. Among the most disturbing discoveries were communications with other members of Jennifer's criminal network. They'd been coordinating their activities across multiple states, sharing intelligence about wealthy families and successful individuals who might be vulnerable to romance scams or other forms of financial manipulation. "We're dealing with organized crime," Daniel said as we processed the magnitude of what had been uncovered. "This isn't just about Tyler anymore. Jennifer's network has probably victimized hundreds of people across the country." The federal authorities who took over the case confirmed Daniel's assessment. Jennifer Collins was a small part of a much larger criminal organization that had been operating for years. Her arrest would hopefully lead to the exposure and prosecution of an entire network of financial predators. Tyler was moved to a safe house while investigators processed the evidence and prepared for Jennifer's arraignment. The psychological relief of finally being free from her manipulation was evident, though he still struggled with feelings of shame and self-blame for having been victimized so thoroughly. "I keep thinking I should have seen through her earlier," Tyler confided during one of our conversations at the safe house. "All the signs were there. The lies about her background, the way she isolated me from family, the constant monitoring of my communications. How did I miss something so obvious?" "Because you're a good person who wanted to believe the best about someone you loved," I replied. Jennifer and her associates are professionals who spent years perfecting these techniques. You weren't naive or stupid. You were targeted by experts who knew exactly how to exploit your decency and trust. The legal proceedings moved quickly, with Patricia coordinating between federal prosecutors and local district attorneys to ensure that Jennifer faced the maximum possible charges. The evidence was so overwhelming that her defense team immediately began negotiating for a plea agreement rather than risk a trial. "She's looking at decades in federal prison," Patricia reported during one of our strategy meetings. "The identity theft charges alone carry heavy sentences, and the organized crime aspects add additional penalties. Her attorneys know they have no chance of winning at trial, so they're trying to minimize her exposure through cooperation with authorities." Jennifer's cooperation led to arrests across 3 states, as federal agents dismantled her criminal network. The scope of their operations was staggering, with victims losing millions of dollars to sophisticated romance scams and identity theft schemes. Tyler's case had accidentally exposed one of the largest financial crime organizations that federal authorities had ever encountered. "Your brother's courage in coming forward probably saved dozens of other potential victims," Patricia told me as the investigation expanded. "If he'd remained silent, Jennifer's network could have continued operating for years, destroying more families and stealing more life savings." The personal cost to Tyler was enormous, but his decision to fight back had ultimately served a greater purpose. His victimization had led to justice not just for himself, but for countless other people who'd been targeted by the same criminal organization. As Jennifer's arraignment approached, Tyler faced the difficult decision of whether to attend the proceedings. Seeing his abuser in court might provide closure, but it could also be psychologically traumatic after months of manipulation and control. "Whatever you decide, we'll support you," Daniel assured him. "You've already shown incredible courage by coming forward. You don't owe anyone anything more than you've already given." Tyler ultimately chose to attend the arraignment, wanting to look Jennifer in the eye as she faced the consequences of her crimes. It would be the first time he'd seen her since the morning he'd left for work, not knowing he'd never return to their shared life of deception and abuse. The courtroom was packed with federal agents, prosecutors, and representatives from victim advocacy groups. Jennifer's case had attracted significant attention due to the sophisticated nature of the criminal network and the number of victims involved. Tyler sat between Daniel and me, drawing strength from our presence as he prepared to confront his abuser one final time. When Jennifer was led into the courtroom in handcuffs, Tyler's reaction surprised everyone, including himself. Instead of fear or anger, he felt only pity for the woman who'd chosen to build her life on deception and exploitation. The power she'd once held over him had evaporated completely, replaced by the strength that came from truth and justice. "She looks so ordinary," Tyler whispered as Jennifer took her seat at the defense table. "For months she seemed larger than life, controlling every aspect of my existence. Now she just looks like what she really is, a criminal who's finally been caught." The transformation in Tyler's perspective marked the beginning of his emotional recovery from Jennifer's abuse. He was finally ready to reclaim his life and rebuild his relationships with the family who'd never stopped fighting for his freedom. The arraignment proceeded with mechanical precision, but I could sense Tyler's growing agitation as Jennifer's defense attorney painted her as a victim of circumstance, rather than the calculating predator we knew her to be. When the judge asked if she understood the charges against her, Jennifer's voice was steady and composed, showing none of the vulnerability she'd performed so masterfully during her marriage to Tyler. "Your Honor, My client maintains her innocence and requests reasonable bail pending trial, her attorney announced, as if organized financial crime was merely a misunderstanding between friends. Patricia was on her feet immediately. Your Honor, the defendant is a flight risk with documented ties to criminal organizations in multiple states. She has no legitimate residence, no verifiable employment, and has demonstrated a pattern of assuming false identities to evade prosecution. The government requests that she be held without bail. The judge reviewed the evidence briefly before denying bail, citing the extensive nature of the fraud and Jennifer's history of using false identities. As she was led away in handcuffs, Jennifer's eyes swept the courtroom and locked onto Tyler's for just a moment. Instead of the loving gaze he'd once cherished, her expression held pure contempt and calculation, as if she was already planning her next move. Outside the courthouse, Tyler was quiet as we walked to Daniel's car. The October air was crisp, and downtown Denver bustled with its usual energy, but Tyler seemed disconnected from the world around him. It wasn't until we were driving back toward the safe house that he finally spoke. She looked right through me, he said, his voice barely audible over the sound of traffic. Like I was nothing, like our entire marriage meant absolutely nothing to her. Because it didn't, I said gently. Tyler, you were never a person to her. You were a resource to be exploited. The fact that she showed no emotion or regret proves that everything she ever said or did was calculated manipulation. Daniel caught Tyler's eyes in the rearview mirror. That coldness you saw? That's who she really is. The woman you thought you married never existed. She was a carefully constructed character, designed to exploit your best qualities. The revelation seemed to lift a weight from Tyler's shoulders. For months, he'd been struggling with the cognitive dissonance of loving someone who'd systematically betrayed him. Seeing Jennifer's true nature so starkly displayed finally allowed him to separate his genuine emotions from the artificial relationship she'd created. Patricia called while we were having dinner at the safe house, her voice carrying a note of satisfaction that was rare for the usually composed attorney. Jennifer's defense team just contacted us about a plea agreement. They want to avoid federal trial, which means they're willing to make significant concessions to secure a reduced sentence. The proposed plea deal was comprehensive. Jennifer would provide detailed information about her criminal network, return all stolen assets that could be recovered, and serve a minimum of 15 years in federal prison. Most importantly for Tyler, she would be permanently barred from contacting him or any member of our family. What about the other victims? Tyler asked when Patricia explained the terms. The people she hurt before me, and the ones her network was planning to target? Patricia's voice warmed slightly at Tyler's concern for others, despite his own traumatic experience. Her cooperation is expected to lead to additional arrests and significant asset recovery for previous victims. Your courage in coming forward has created a domino effect that will help dozens of other families. The plea negotiations took several weeks, during which Tyler began the difficult process of rebuilding his life. The financial damage was extensive but not insurmountable, thanks to Daniel's resources and Patricia's expertise in victim recovery law. More challenging was the psychological recovery from months of systematic manipulation and abuse. Tyler started therapy with a specialist in domestic violence and financial abuse, working to understand how Jennifer had exploited his psychological vulnerabilities so effectively. The sessions were painful but necessary, helping him recognize the signs of manipulation he'd missed and develop strategies for protecting himself in future relationships. She identified every insecurity I had about my career, my income, my social status, Tyler explained during one family dinner at our penthouse. Then she positioned herself as the solution to all those insecurities, while simultaneously making them worse. It was like she was poisoning me while pretending to be the antidote. The therapy also helped Tyler process his feelings about our family's intervention. Initially, he'd felt embarrassed that his wealthy sister and brother-in-law had needed to rescue him from his own poor judgment. Over time, he came to understand that seeking help wasn't a sign of weakness but of wisdom. I was so worried about appearing successful and independent that I isolated myself from the people who could have helped me see what was happening, Tyler reflected. Jennifer exploited that pride, making me feel like admitting problems would be admitting failure. Daniel had been quietly working on another aspect of Tyler's recovery. Using his business connections and influence, he'd arranged for Tyler to transfer to a prestigious private school with a significantly higher salary and better benefits. The position came with housing assistance that would help Tyler rebuild his financial stability more quickly. "You don't have to accept," Daniel said when he presented the opportunity, "but the school has an excellent reputation, and the students come from families who value education. It might be a good fresh start, away from any reminders of what happened." Tyler was initially hesitant to accept what felt like charity, but he gradually came to understand that accepting help from family wasn't dependence. It was allowing the people who loved him to express that love through action. The new position would also provide distance from any associates of Jennifer who might still be operating in the area. The breakthrough in Tyler's emotional recovery came during a family dinner at our parents' house in early December. Our mother had prepared Tyler's favorite meal, and the conversation flowed naturally between work stories, holiday plans, and gentle teasing that had characterized our family dinners for years. For the first time since Jennifer had entered his life, Tyler seemed genuinely relaxed and present. "I feel like myself again," Tyler said as we cleaned up after dinner. "For months, I couldn't remember who I was before Jennifer. She'd convinced me that everything about my personality needed to be improved or corrected. Tonight, I remembered that I actually like who I am." The legal proceedings reached their conclusion just before Christmas. Jennifer accepted the plea agreement, admitting to multiple counts of identity theft, wire fraud, and racketeering. Her cooperation led to the arrest of 7 other members of her criminal network and the recovery of over $2 million in stolen assets. At the sentencing hearing, Tyler chose to deliver a victim impact statement. Standing at the podium in the federal courthouse, he looked directly at Jennifer as he spoke about the damage her crimes had caused, not just to his finances, but to his ability to trust and form relationships. "You didn't just steal my money or damage my credit," Tyler said, his voice steady and strong. "You stole months of my life, poisoned my relationships with people I love, and made me question my own judgment and worth. But you failed to destroy the things that really mattered: my family, my values, and my capacity to rebuild." Jennifer showed no reaction to Tyler's statement, maintaining the cold composure she'd displayed throughout the legal proceedings. When given the opportunity to address the court herself, she declined, leaving her attorney to deliver a perfunctory apology that fooled no one. The judge sentenced Jennifer to 18 years in federal prison, noting the sophisticated nature of her crimes and the extensive harm caused to multiple victims. With good behavior, she might be eligible for parole in 12 years, but her criminal record would make it difficult for her to ever again prey on unsuspecting victims. "Justice has been served," Patricia said as we left the courthouse for the final time. Jennifer Collins will spend the best years of her adult life in prison, and her criminal network has been dismantled. Tyler can finally move forward with complete confidence that this chapter of his life is closed. The holidays that year were particularly meaningful for our family. Tyler's recovery had brought us closer together, reinforcing the bonds that Jennifer had tried so hard to break. He'd moved into his new apartment near the private school, where he would start teaching in January, and his enthusiasm for the fresh start was evident in everything he did. Daniel had insisted on hosting Christmas dinner at our penthouse, wanting to celebrate Tyler's freedom and our family's resilience in the face of such a sophisticated attack. As we gathered around our dining table, overlooking the snow-covered Rocky Mountains, I reflected on how much had changed since Jennifer first entered our lives. "I want to thank all of you," Tyler said as we raised our glasses for a toast. "Not just for saving me from Jennifer, but for never giving up on me even when I couldn't see what was happening. I know I wasn't easy to help during those months when I was so isolated and defensive." Our father, who had remained characteristically quiet throughout the ordeal, spoke up with tears in his eyes. "Son, you don't thank family for being family. We look out for each other. That's what we do." The sentiment captured something essential about our experience. Jennifer's criminal enterprise had been sophisticated and well-funded, but it had ultimately failed, because it had underestimated the strength of genuine family bonds. No amount of psychological manipulation could permanently break connections built on decades of love, trust, and shared experiences. Tyler's new teaching position began in January, and he threw himself into the work with renewed passion. His experience with Jennifer had given him insights into manipulation and abuse that made him particularly effective at recognizing troubled students who might be vulnerable to predatory behavior. "I can spot the signs now," Tyler told me during one of our resumed weekly lunch dates. "Kids who seem isolated from family, who have sudden changes in behavior or unexplained money problems. I've already been able to connect 2 students with counseling services before their situations got worse." Tyler's victimization had been transformed into a source of strength and wisdom that benefited others. He began volunteering with victim advocacy groups, sharing his story to help other survivors recognize that they weren't alone or uniquely vulnerable. His perspective as an educated professional who'd been systematically manipulated helped dispel myths about who could fall victim to sophisticated scams. The financial recovery took longer, but Daniel's resources and Patricia's expertise made the process as smooth as possible. Tyler's credit was restored within 6 months, and the fraudulent debts were eliminated from his record. The house he'd shared with Jennifer was sold, with the proceeds going toward victim restitution and Tyler's fresh start. By the spring, Tyler had begun dating again, approaching new relationships with wisdom earned through painful experience. He'd learned to recognize red flags that he'd previously missed, and he maintained open communication with family and friends who could provide objective perspectives on his romantic choices. "I'm not afraid of being hurt again," Tyler explained when I worried about his emotional readiness for dating. "I'm afraid of being blind again. But now I know what manipulation looks like, and I have people in my life who will tell me the truth even when it's difficult to hear." The woman Tyler eventually began seeing seriously was another teacher at his school, someone whose background was easily verified and whose integration into his social circle happened naturally rather than through isolation tactics. Their relationship developed slowly, with Tyler maintaining his independence and family connections throughout the courtship. Daniel and I watched Tyler's recovery with pride and relief, knowing that he'd not only survived Jennifer's abuse, but had emerged stronger and wiser. The ordeal had tested our family's bonds but had ultimately reinforced our commitment to protecting and supporting each other. "You know what I realized?" Daniel said one evening as we walked through downtown Denver, the same route I'd taken on that autumn day when I'd first called Tyler to express my concerns about Jennifer. "Wealth and success can protect you from many things, but they can't protect you from human predators who understand psychology and emotion." Tyler's recovery required more than money. It required courage, love, and the willingness to face difficult truths. The experience had changed all of us. I'd learned to trust my instincts about people who seemed to divide families or isolate loved ones from their support systems. Daniel had gained new appreciation for the vulnerability that came with success, recognizing that wealth could make families targets for sophisticated criminal enterprises. Our parents had struggled with feelings of helplessness during Tyler's ordeal, but they'd also discovered reserves of strength they hadn't known they possessed. Watching their son suffer under Jennifer's manipulation while feeling unable to help had been agonizing, but their unwavering support during his recovery had been crucial to his healing. The legal aftermath continued for months as other victims of Jennifer's network came forward and additional arrests were made. Patricia kept us informed of the proceedings, noting that Tyler's case had become a model for how families could work together to combat sophisticated financial abuse. "Your brother's courage in seeking help and your family's coordinated response saved not just Tyler but potentially dozens of other victims," Patricia observed during one of our final legal meetings. The criminal network was preparing to expand their operations significantly when Tyler's case exposed their methods. As the second anniversary of Jennifer's arrest approached, Tyler had fully rebuilt his life. He'd been promoted to department head at his school, had established a serious relationship with a woman our entire family adored, and had become a recognized advocate for domestic violence and financial abuse awareness. "Sometimes I'm almost grateful for what happened," Tyler said during a family dinner at our parents' house. "Not for the pain or the financial damage, but for what I learned about myself and about the people who really matter in my life. Jennifer tried to destroy our family bonds, but she actually made them stronger. The observation was profound and characteristic of Tyler's generous spirit. He'd transformed his victimization into wisdom, his trauma into strength, and his isolation into deeper connections with the people who loved him. Jennifer's criminal enterprise had ultimately failed not because of law enforcement or legal proceedings, but because it had underestimated the power of authentic love and loyalty. Daniel raised his glass for a toast, as had become our tradition during family gatherings. To Tyler, for having the courage to seek help when he needed it. To Emma, for trusting her instincts and refusing to give up on her brother. To family bonds that are stronger than any criminal's ability to break them. As we clinked our glasses together, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this moment. Jennifer Collins was serving her sentence in federal prison. Her criminal network had been dismantled, and Tyler was thriving in his rebuilt life. Justice had been served, but more importantly, love had triumphed over manipulation, truth had overcome deception, and family had proven stronger than the forces that had tried to tear us apart. The story that had begun with betrayal and manipulation had ended with redemption and renewal. Tyler's experience had been traumatic, but it had also revealed the depth of our family's commitment to protecting and supporting each other. In trying to exploit our love for Tyler, Jennifer had inadvertently strengthened the very bonds she'd tried to break. Looking around the table at the faces of the people I loved most, I felt grateful for the difficult lessons we'd learned and the strength we'd discovered in each other. Tyler's ordeal was over, but the wisdom we'd gained and the connections we'd reinforced would protect our family for generations to come. The call came at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday in late February, jerking me from sleep with its urgent tone. Tyler's name flashed on my phone screen, and my heart immediately began racing. He'd been doing so well in his recovery that early morning calls had become a thing of the past. "Emma, you need to get down here right now." Tyler's voice was tight with controlled panic. "Jennifer escaped during a prison transport yesterday. The FBI just left my apartment. They think she might try to contact me or retaliate against our family." The words hit me like ice water. Jennifer Collins was supposed to be safely locked away for the next decade and a half, her ability to harm anyone neutralized by concrete walls and armed guards. The idea that she was free and potentially targeting our family again made my stomach clench with familiar fear. Daniel was already moving toward his phone as I relayed Tyler's message. Within minutes, he'd contacted Patricia Walsh and activated the security protocols we'd hoped never to need again. Our penthouse building's security was enhanced. Our parents were moved to a secure location, and Tyler was placed under protective surveillance. "How did this happen?" I demanded when Patricia arrived at our home an hour later, her usually immaculate appearance slightly disheveled from the emergency response. "Prison transport to a federal courthouse in Colorado Springs for testimony in another case," Patricia explained grimly. The transport van was involved in what appeared to be a traffic accident, but investigators now believe it was deliberately staged. Jennifer and 2 other prisoners escaped during the confusion. The sophisticated nature of the escape suggested that Jennifer's criminal network was more extensive and better organized than even federal investigators had realized. Despite the arrests and prosecutions that had followed Tyler's case, enough of the organization remained intact to mount a complex rescue operation. "She had help from the outside," Patricia continued. "Professional help. The kind of resources and planning this required indicates that Jennifer was more valuable to her criminal organization than we understood. They wouldn't risk this kind of exposure for just any member." Daniel was coordinating security arrangements from his home office, his business acumen proving invaluable in organizing protective measures for our extended family. Within hours, he'd arranged for private security details, safe house accommodations, and communication protocols that would keep everyone protected while allowing normal life to continue as much as possible. "The FBI believes Jennifer will try to settle scores before fleeing the country," Patricia warned. She blamed Tyler for the destruction of her network during her interrogations. Her psychological profile suggests she views him as personally responsible for her imprisonment and the loss of her criminal empire. The threat felt surreal after months of rebuilding and healing. Tyler had just begun to reclaim his life, establishing new routines and relationships that weren't overshadowed by Jennifer's manipulation. Now her presence loomed over our family once again, threatening to undo the progress we'd all made. Tyler arrived at our penthouse that afternoon, accompanied by 2 federal agents who would remain with him around the clock until Jennifer was recaptured. He looked exhausted and frustrated, the confident demeanor he'd rebuilt over the past year replaced by the haunted expression I remembered from his darkest days under Jennifer's control. "I thought this was over," Tyler said as he collapsed onto our living room sofa. "I thought I could finally stop looking over my shoulder and worrying about what she might do next. Now she's out there somewhere, probably planning God knows what kind of revenge." Daniel sat across from Tyler, his expression serious but calm. "She's desperate now, which makes her dangerous but also reckless. Desperate people make mistakes, and Jennifer has already made several. The escape might have given her temporary freedom, but it's also ensured that every law enforcement agency in the country is hunting for her. The FBI had issued a nationwide alert with Jennifer's photograph and known aliases. Her face was appearing on news broadcasts and wanted posters across multiple states. The publicity was both protective and dangerous. It would make it harder for Jennifer to move freely, but it also announced to anyone watching that our family was involved in a high-profile criminal case. She won't stay hidden for long," one of the federal agents observed. "Escaped prisoners typically have very limited resources and support networks. Without her criminal organization's infrastructure, she'll be forced to take risks to survive." Despite the agent's reassurances, the waiting was agonizing. Every unexpected sound, every unfamiliar face, every phone call from an unknown number carried the potential threat of Jennifer's presence. The psychological warfare was as effective as any physical attack, forcing our family back into a state of hypervigilance we'd thought we'd left behind. The breakthrough came 3 days later, when Jennifer made the mistake that Patricia and the FBI had been anticipating. Driven by rage and desperation, she attempted to access one of the financial accounts she'd established using Tyler's identity. The transaction triggered alerts that had been in place since her original arrest, immediately pinpointing her location to a motel outside Grand Junction. "She's trying to recover money she hid during her original criminal activities," Patricia explained when she called with the news. The account was flagged and monitored, so the moment she tried to access it, federal agents were dispatched to her location. The capture attempt went wrong in exactly the way everyone had feared. Jennifer had anticipated that her former accounts might be monitored, and she'd used the transaction as bait to draw law enforcement into a trap. When FBI agents arrived at the motel, they found explosives rigged to detonate when the door was opened. "She's escalated to terrorism," Patricia reported grimly. "This isn't just about financial crime anymore. Jennifer is willing to kill law enforcement officers to avoid capture. The threat level has been elevated to the highest possible category." The failed capture attempt had one positive outcome. It provided investigators with crucial intelligence about Jennifer's current resources and state of mind. Forensic analysis of the explosives revealed that she had access to military-grade materials and sophisticated timing devices, confirming that her criminal network was still providing support. "She's not working alone," the lead FBI agent explained during a briefing at our penthouse. "The explosives and detonation equipment require expertise and connections that Jennifer doesn't possess. Someone with significant resources is helping her, which means the threat extends beyond just her personal vendetta." Daniel's expression hardened as the implications became clear. They're using Jennifer's escape as an opportunity to eliminate the witnesses who destroyed their network. This isn't just about revenge. It's about silencing the people who can testify against the remaining organization members. The realization transformed our situation from a personal threat to a strategic battle between our family and a sophisticated criminal enterprise. We weren't just hiding from one escaped prisoner. We were facing an organized attempt to eliminate the witnesses who dismantled their operations. "We need to go on the offensive," Daniel declared, his businessman's instincts recognizing that defensive measures alone wouldn't be sufficient. "Sitting in safe houses and waiting for them to make the next move gives them all the advantages. We need to force them into making mistakes." Patricia nodded approvingly. The FBI has been thinking along the same lines. They want to use Tyler as bait to draw Jennifer into a controlled situation where she can be captured safely. It's risky, but it might be the only way to end this threat permanently. Tyler's reaction to the proposal was immediate and decisive. "I'll do it. I'm tired of running and hiding from someone who's already stolen too much of my life. If my cooperation can help capture Jennifer and protect other potential victims, then that's what we need to do." The operation required weeks of careful planning and coordination between multiple law enforcement agencies. Tyler would return to his normal routine at the private school, but under constant surveillance and protection. The goal was to create an opportunity for Jennifer to attempt contact or assault, while ensuring that Tyler remained safe and that Jennifer could be captured without endangering innocent bystanders. The key is making it appear that Tyler is vulnerable while actually maintaining multiple layers of protection, the operation commander explained. Jennifer's psychological profile suggests she'll want to confront Tyler personally, rather than simply eliminating him from a distance. Her need for control and dominance means she'll try to recreate the dynamic of their marriage before harming him. The psychological aspects of the operation were as important as the tactical elements. Jennifer's behavior patterns suggested that she would want to regain psychological control over Tyler before taking any violent action. This gave the FBI opportunities to intercede, but it also required Tyler to endure potentially traumatic interactions with his former abuser. "I can handle it," Tyler insisted when Patricia expressed concerns about the psychological toll. "I understand Jennifer's methods now, and I won't be manipulated again. If she wants to try to control me one more time, she'll discover that I'm not the same person she victimized." The waiting period was excruciating for our entire family. Tyler maintained his teaching schedule while federal agents posed as maintenance workers, substitute teachers, and delivery personnel around the school. Every interaction Tyler had was monitored and analyzed for signs that Jennifer might be watching or preparing to make contact. The first indication that Jennifer was close came when Tyler's students began receiving unusual gifts and messages. Small tokens, flowers, chocolates, notes, were left in their lockers with messages suggesting that their teacher was special and deserved their loyalty and protection. The gifts were signed with initials that meant nothing to the students but were clearly Jennifer's way of announcing her presence. "She's trying to recreate the grooming process she used on Tyler," the FBI behavioral analyst explained. "By targeting his students, she's attempting to use his protective instincts against him. She knows Tyler will put himself at risk to protect the kids in his care." The psychological manipulation was sophisticated and deeply personal. Jennifer had identified Tyler's greatest vulnerability, his care for his students, and was exploiting it to force him into an impossible choice between his own safety and theirs. Tyler's response was characteristically selfless and brave. Rather than removing himself from the situation to protect the students, he worked with federal agents to use Jennifer's tactics against her. The school was evacuated under the pretense of a gas leak, ensuring student safety while creating the isolated environment where Jennifer would likely make her move. "She'll come tonight," Tyler predicted as agents took their positions around the empty school building. Jennifer always preferred to operate in controlled environments where she felt she had advantages. An empty school where she once felt humiliated will appeal to her sense of dramatic justice. The confrontation began just after midnight, when motion sensors detected someone entering the school through a maintenance entrance that should have been secured. Jennifer had somehow obtained master keys, suggesting that her infiltration of Tyler's life had been even more thorough than anyone had realized. Tyler waited in his classroom, wearing a concealed recording device and surrounded by hidden federal agents. When Jennifer appeared in his doorway, she looked nothing like the polished woman who'd once charmed our family at Sunday dinners. Months of imprisonment followed by days on the run had stripped away her careful facade, revealing the predator beneath. "Hello, Tyler," Jennifer said, her voice carrying the same manipulative sweetness that had once made him feel special and loved. "I've missed you terribly. Prison gave me so much time to think about our marriage and all the mistakes I made." Tyler's response was steady and controlled, showing none of the vulnerability Jennifer had once exploited so effectively. "Hello, Jennifer, or should I call you by your real name? I know who you really are now, and I know what you really wanted from me." The conversation that followed was captured in its entirety by the recording equipment, providing unprecedented insight into the mind of a professional manipulator. Jennifer attempted to use every psychological technique that had once controlled Tyler: love bombing, gaslighting, threats, and promises. But Tyler remained unmoved. You destroyed our life together, Jennifer accused when her manipulation tactics failed to achieve their intended effect. We could have been happy if you hadn't let your jealous sister poison your mind against me. I gave you everything, and you threw it away for people who don't really care about you. Tyler's laugh was genuine and healthy, the sound of someone who'd found real strength and self-knowledge. You never gave me anything real, Jennifer. Every word you said, every emotion you showed, every moment of intimacy we shared, was calculated manipulation designed to exploit my trust and steal my resources. I'm grateful you showed me your true nature tonight, because it confirms that leaving you was the best decision I ever made. The rejection of her manipulation sent Jennifer into a rage that revealed her true nature completely. The mask of civilized behavior that she'd maintained throughout their marriage disappeared, replaced by the cold calculation of a predator who'd been denied her prey. You think you're safe because your rich sister and her billionaire husband can protect you? Jennifer snarled, pulling a knife from her jacket. Money can't save you from someone who has nothing left to lose. I'll make sure your family understands the price of interfering with my life. The threat against our family triggered the federal agent's intervention. Jennifer was surrounded and disarmed within seconds, but not before Tyler had demonstrated courage that amazed everyone present. Instead of cowering or trying to flee, he'd positioned himself between Jennifer and the doorway, protecting the agents who were moving to apprehend her. You're done, Jennifer, Tyler said as she was handcuffed and read her rights. You'll never hurt me or anyone I love again. Your power over me died the day I learned who you really are. Jennifer's capture marked the end of a nightmare that had stretched across nearly 2 years of our family's life. The recording of her threats and attempted assault, combined with the evidence of her escape and terrorist activities, would ensure that she faced decades in federal prison with no possibility of early release. It's over, Patricia announced when she called with news of Jennifer's arraignment. She's been charged with escape, terrorism, attempted murder, and violation of federal witness protection. The judge denied bail and ordered psychiatric evaluation. She'll spend the rest of her life in maximum security federal facilities. Tyler's recovery from the final confrontation was remarkably swift, helped by the closure that came from facing his abuser on equal terms and emerging victorious. The frightened, manipulated man Jennifer had once controlled was gone forever, replaced by someone stronger and wiser than even Tyler had known he could become. I'm proud of you, Daniel told Tyler as our family gathered for a celebration dinner at our penthouse. You faced down a dangerous criminal and protected not just yourself, but potentially dozens of other people she might have victimized. That takes courage most people never have to discover they possess. The ordeal had transformed Tyler in ways that went beyond simple recovery from abuse. His experience with Jennifer and his role in exposing her criminal network had given him insights into human nature and institutional systems that made him uniquely valuable as an educator and advocate. Tyler returned to his teaching position with new authority and wisdom that his students immediately recognized. His experience with manipulation and abuse made him extraordinarily effective at identifying troubled students and connecting them with appropriate resources. Several potential tragedies were averted when Tyler recognized warning signs that other educators might have missed. Going through hell with Jennifer taught me to recognize when someone is drowning, Tyler explained during a faculty meeting where he was honored for his intervention work. Students who are being manipulated or abused show the same signs I displayed when I was under Jennifer's control. Now I know what to look for and how to help. Tyler's advocacy work expanded beyond the school environment. He began speaking at conferences about financial abuse and domestic violence, sharing his story to help other victims recognize that they weren't alone or uniquely vulnerable. His perspective as an educated professional who'd been systematically manipulated helped dispel harmful myths about who could fall victim to sophisticated abuse. Predators like Jennifer target good people specifically because of their positive qualities, Tyler would tell audiences. Kindness, trust, loyalty, and the desire for connection aren't weaknesses to be ashamed of. They're strengths that criminals exploit. But they're also the qualities that make life worth living and relationships meaningful. The legal aftermath of Jennifer's final capture continued for months. as prosecutors built comprehensive cases against the remaining members of her criminal network. Tyler's testimony was crucial in several trials, helping to secure convictions that dismantled one of the most sophisticated financial crime organizations federal authorities had ever encountered. "Your brother's courage didn't just save his own life," Patricia observed during one of our final legal meetings. "His willingness to confront Jennifer and testify against her network probably prevented hundreds of future victims from being exploited. The criminals we've convicted were planning to expand their operations significantly." Tyler met Sarah Chen at an advocacy conference 18 months after Jennifer's final capture. Sarah was a social worker who specialized in helping domestic violence survivors rebuild their lives and relationships. Their connection was immediate and genuine, built on shared values and mutual respect rather than manipulation or exploitation. "What I love about Sarah is how naturally she fits into my existing life," Tyler told me when he introduced her to our family. "She encourages my friendships, supports my career goals, and actually seems to enjoy spending time with all of you." After Jennifer's isolation tactics, being with someone who adds to my life instead of subtracting from it feels revolutionary. Sarah's integration into our family was seamless and healthy. She participated in our Sunday dinners and holiday celebrations without trying to monopolize Tyler's attention or create artificial divisions. When Tyler proposed to her 2 years later, our entire family celebrated not just their engagement, but the evidence of Tyler's complete emotional recovery. "This is what a healthy relationship looks like," our mother observed as we watched Tyler and Sarah dancing at their engagement party. "She makes him more himself, not less. She builds him up instead of tearing him down." Jennifer tried to remake Tyler into someone else, but Sarah loves exactly who he is. The wedding took place in the mountains outside Denver, with security provided discreetly by Daniel's team, but without the constant vigilance that had characterized Tyler's life during Jennifer's imprisonment and escape. For the first time in years, our family could celebrate without looking over our shoulders or worrying about hidden threats. "I never thought I'd be able to trust my own judgment about relationships again," Tyler said during his wedding speech. "Jennifer's manipulation made me question everything about myself and my ability to recognize genuine love. But Sarah taught me that healing doesn't mean becoming cynical. It means becoming wiser while keeping your heart open." Tyler and Sarah's marriage thrived in ways that highlighted how destructive his relationship with Jennifer had really been. Where Jennifer had isolated Tyler from family and friends, Sarah encouraged and deepened those connections. Where Jennifer had undermined Tyler's confidence and career satisfaction, Sarah supported his professional growth and celebrated his achievements. "The difference is night and day," Daniel observed during one family gathering. Tyler was diminished by his relationship with Jennifer. Smaller, quieter, less confident. With Sarah, he's become more than he was before. That's what real love does. It multiplies your strengths instead of exploiting your vulnerabilities. The Financial Crimes Unit that had handled Jennifer's case used Tyler's experience as a model for training other investigators and prosecutors. His insights into the psychological aspects of long-term financial manipulation helped law enforcement agencies across the country recognize and combat similar criminal enterprises. Tyler's case changed how we approach these investigations, the lead FBI agent explained when he visited our family 5 years after Jennifer's original arrest. "We now understand that financial abuse often involves the same psychological tactics as domestic violence." Tyler's willingness to share his experience has helped us save other families from going through what you endured. Jennifer Collins died in federal prison 7 years after her final capture, the victim of violence from other inmates who disapproved of her crimes against families and children. Tyler felt no satisfaction at the news, only a quiet relief that she could never again threaten the people he loved. "I forgave Jennifer a long time ago," Tyler said when reporters asked for his reaction to her death. "Not because she deserved forgiveness, but because carrying anger was hurting me more than it was hurting her. Her death doesn't change anything about my life or my relationships. The power she once had over me ended the day I chose to seek help instead of suffering in silence." Tyler's story became a testament to the power of family love, professional intervention, and personal courage in overcoming sophisticated criminal manipulation. His journey from victim to survivor to advocate inspired thousands of other abuse survivors to seek help and rebuild their lives. Looking back, I'm almost grateful for what happened, Tyler reflected during a family dinner celebrating the 10th anniversary of Jennifer's original arrest. Not for the pain or the fear, but for what I learned about myself and about the people who truly matter in my life. Jennifer tried to destroy our family, but she actually made us stronger and closer than we'd ever been before. The legacy of Tyler's experience extended far beyond our immediate family. His advocacy work, combined with the legal precedents established by his case, led to stronger protections for domestic violence victims and more effective prosecution of financial abuse crimes. Law enforcement agencies developed new training protocols based on the lessons learned from Jennifer's criminal enterprise. Evil exists in the world, Tyler would tell audiences at speaking engagements. There are people who will exploit your best qualities for their own gain. But good also exists. And it's stronger than evil when good people choose to stand together and protect each other. My family saved my life not through wealth or power, but through love and refusal to give up on someone they cared about. As I watched Tyler and Sarah's children play in our parents' backyard during a recent family gathering, I marveled at how completely Tyler had rebuilt his life from the wreckage Jennifer had created. The confident, loving father and husband bore little resemblance to the isolated, manipulated man who'd once been trapped in Jennifer's web of lies. "You saved me," Tyler said as we watched the children together. "Not just from Jennifer, but from becoming someone I wasn't meant to be. If you hadn't trusted your instincts and refused to give up on me, I would have lost everything that really mattered." The truth was that Tyler had saved himself through his courage to seek help and face difficult realities. Our family had provided support and resources, but Tyler's strength and determination had carried him through the darkest periods of his recovery and growth. Jennifer Collins had intended to destroy our family's bonds and exploit our love for each other. Instead, her criminal enterprise had revealed the true depth of our connections and our commitment to protecting one another. Love had triumphed over manipulation, truth had overcome deception, and family had proven stronger than any force that tried to tear us apart. The courthouse steps felt different this time as I stood beside Tyler, watching him prepare to deliver his final testimony in the landmark federal case that would forever change how domestic violence and financial abuse were prosecuted in this country. 3 years had passed since Jennifer's death in prison, but her criminal network's reach had been far more extensive than anyone had initially understood. Today marked the conclusion of the largest multi-state prosecution of organized romance fraud in American legal history. Tyler adjusted his tie nervously, a gesture that reminded me of the anxious man he'd once been under Jennifer's control. But the resemblance was superficial. The Tyler standing beside me was confident, articulate, and completely comfortable with his role as the key witness, whose courage had exposed an entire criminal enterprise spanning 12 states and involving over 300 victims. "Are you ready for this?" I asked, squeezing his hand as reporters and federal agents bustled around us on the courthouse steps. Tyler smiled, and I saw nothing but calm determination in his eyes. "I've been ready for this moment since the day I realized what Jennifer really was. Every victim deserves justice, and today we're going to get it." The final defendant in the case was Marcus Sullivan, the mastermind behind the criminal network that had recruited and trained predators like Jennifer. His organization had been operating for nearly a decade, developing increasingly sophisticated methods for identifying, targeting, and exploiting vulnerable individuals across the country. Tyler's case had provided the breakthrough that allowed federal investigators to trace the network's operations back to its source. Inside the courtroom, I sat in the gallery with Daniel, our parents, and Sarah, who was now 8 months pregnant with her and Tyler's second child. Their 3-year-old daughter, Emma, named after me, played quietly with coloring books, oblivious to the historic significance of the proceedings unfolding around her. Tyler took the witness stand with the same confidence he brought to his classroom, speaking clearly and directly as he described how Jennifer's manipulation had followed a precise script designed by Sullivan's organization. Every aspect of her approach, from the fabricated background to the psychological pressure tactics, had been refined through years of testing on previous victims. The defendants want you to believe that their victims were somehow complicit in their own exploitation, the prosecutor explained to the jury during closing arguments. But Mr. Mitchell's testimony has shown you the truth. These were not crimes of opportunity committed by desperate individuals. These were systematic, calculated attacks on good people by professional criminals who had turned manipulation and abuse into a science. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Marcus Sullivan was sentenced to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole, joining 7 other network leaders who had already received similar sentences. The organization that had destroyed hundreds of lives was finally and completely dismantled. Outside the courthouse after the verdict, Tyler was surrounded by reporters asking about his experience and his plans for the future. He handled the attention with grace and wisdom, using every question as an opportunity to educate the public about the realities of domestic abuse and financial manipulation. "People often ask me how I could have been fooled by someone like Jennifer," Tyler said to a particularly persistent reporter. But that's exactly the wrong question. The right question is, how did criminals like Jennifer and Marcus Sullivan, perfect techniques that could fool anyone? The answer is that they spent years studying human psychology, identifying our best qualities, our capacity for love, trust, and commitment, and learning to exploit those qualities for profit. Tyler's advocacy work had evolved far beyond simple speaking engagements. He'd established a foundation that provided legal assistance to domestic abuse survivors, helped develop training programs for law enforcement agencies, and funded research into the psychological methods used by sophisticated predators. The foundation was supported by Daniel's business success, but Tyler ran its day-to-day operations with the same dedication he brought to his teaching. What Tyler has accomplished goes beyond personal recovery, Patricia Walsh observed during the foundation's annual fundraising dinner. He's transformed his victimization into a force for protecting others. The legal reforms that have resulted from his advocacy will prevent thousands of future victims from experiencing what he endured. The legal reforms were indeed significant. Tyler's case had exposed gaps in existing laws that allowed sophisticated financial abuse to flourish. New federal legislation now provided stronger protections for domestic violence victims, enhanced penalties for organized fraud schemes, and better coordination between law enforcement agencies investigating multi-state criminal enterprises. Tyler's influence extended to the academic world as well. His insights into the psychology of manipulation had contributed to new research in criminology, psychology, and law enforcement training. Universities across the country used his case as a teaching tool for students studying domestic violence, financial crimes, and victim advocacy. Mr. Mitchell's experience provides a unique window into the mind of both the abuser and the survivor, explained Dr. Rebecca Torres, a psychology professor at the University of Colorado, who had worked extensively with Tyler on research projects. His ability to articulate the psychological processes he experienced during his victimization and recovery has advanced our understanding of trauma and resilience in ways that pure academic study never could. Tyler had also become a sought-after consultant for law enforcement agencies developing new investigative techniques for complex domestic abuse cases. His ability to recognize manipulation tactics and understand victim psychology made him invaluable in training detectives and prosecutors who might encounter similar cases. Tyler can walk into a room and immediately identify the dynamics of an abusive relationship, explained Detective Maria Santos, who worked with Tyler on a task force investigating organized romance fraud. He sees patterns and connections that trained investigators might miss because he's lived through it himself. His expertise has been crucial in several high-profile cases. The personal cost of Tyler's public advocacy work was significant, but manageable thanks to the strong support system he'd built with Sarah and our extended family. The constant reminder of his traumatic experience could have been destructive, but Tyler had found ways to process and channel those memories into positive action. Some people worry that constantly talking about what Jennifer did to me must be re-traumatizing, Tyler explained during an interview with a national news magazine. But the opposite is true. Every time I share my story and help someone else recognize the signs of manipulation, Jennifer's power over me diminishes a little more. She tried to destroy my life for her own gain. Now my life is dedicated to preventing others from suffering what I experienced. Sarah's role in Tyler's continued healing couldn't be overstated. Where Jennifer had isolated Tyler from his support system, Sarah actively encouraged his relationships with family and friends. Where Jennifer had undermined his confidence and independence, Sarah celebrated his strengths and supported his individual goals and interests. The difference between a healthy relationship and an abusive one isn't always obvious from the outside, Sarah observed during a joint interview she and Tyler gave to a domestic violence prevention organization. But the effects on the person are unmistakable. Tyler has flourished in our marriage because I love who he actually is, not who I want him to become. Jennifer tried to remake him into someone else entirely. Tyler and Sarah's marriage had become a model for other abuse survivors who wondered whether they could ever trust again or form healthy relationships. Their partnership demonstrated that recovery was not only possible but could lead to deeper, more meaningful connections than victims had ever experienced before. Tyler taught me that real love multiplies your strengths instead of exploiting your weaknesses, Sarah said during a speaking engagement at a domestic violence shelter. In a healthy relationship, both partners become more themselves, not less. That's how you know the difference between genuine love and sophisticated manipulation. Their children, little Emma and baby James, were growing up in an environment of unconditional love and security that stood in stark contrast to the chaos and control that had characterized Tyler's relationship with Jennifer. Tyler was determined that his children would understand the difference between love and manipulation from an early age. I want my kids to grow up knowing that people who truly love you will never try to isolate you from other people who care about you, Tyler explained during a parenting workshop he conducted for other abuse survivors. Real love creates connections and builds bridges. It doesn't create walls or demand exclusive loyalty. Daniel's role in Tyler's recovery and subsequent advocacy work had been crucial, but typically understated. His resources had made possible the legal fight against Jennifer's network, but more importantly, his unwavering support had given Tyler the security needed to take risks in pursuing justice. Having Daniel's backing meant Tyler could focus on healing and advocacy without worrying about financial security or legal protection, Patricia observed. That kind of support is rare and invaluable. It allowed Tyler to become a public figure in ways that might have been impossible for someone without those resources. The ripple effects of Tyler's courage continued to spread years after Jennifer's criminal network had been dismantled. Other victims of similar schemes found the courage to come forward, leading to additional prosecutions and recoveries. Law enforcement agencies developed new protocols based on lessons learned from Tyler's case. Academic researchers gained insights that advanced understanding of domestic abuse and financial manipulation. What started as one family's fight against a sophisticated criminal has become a movement that's protecting families across the country, observed FBI Director Helen Morrison during a ceremony honoring Tyler's contributions to law enforcement. Mr. Mitchell's willingness to turn his personal trauma into public advocacy has literally saved lives and prevented countless future victims from being exploited. Tyler's transformation from victim to advocate to national expert had been remarkable, but perhaps most impressive was how completely he'd maintained his essential character throughout the process. The kind, thoughtful man who'd been targeted by Jennifer's network had become stronger and wiser, but hadn't become cynical or closed off. Tyler's greatest achievement isn't his professional success or public recognition, our father observed during Tyler's 40th birthday celebration. It's that he's remained the same good person he always was, just with better boundaries and deeper wisdom. Jennifer tried to destroy his capacity for trust and love, but instead she accidentally taught him how to love more wisely. As I watched Tyler blow out his birthday candles, surrounded by family, friends, and colleagues whose lives he'd touched through his work, I reflected on the incredible journey that had brought us all to this moment. What had begun as a nightmare of manipulation and abuse had ultimately become a story of triumph, transformation, and the power of turning pain into purpose. Tyler's legacy extended far beyond his personal recovery. The legal reforms, educational programs, and support systems he'd helped create would protect future generations from the kind of exploitation he'd endured. His story had become a beacon of hope for other survivors, proving that recovery was not only possible but could lead to lives of meaning and impact. "Sometimes I think Jennifer accidentally did the world a favor," Tyler said as we cleaned up after his birthday party. "Not intentionally, of course. But by targeting our family, she exposed a criminal network that might have operated for years if left undiscovered. The victims of that network got justice, and future victims were protected. Her evil intentions ultimately created good outcomes." The observation was characteristically generous and wise, reflecting Tyler's remarkable ability to find meaning and purpose, even in traumatic experiences. He'd refused to let Jennifer's cruelty define his future, instead using it as motivation to build something better for himself and others. Looking ahead, Tyler's work continued to evolve and expand. He was writing a book about his experience that would provide detailed guidance for other abuse survivors and their families. He was developing new training programs for educators to help them recognize signs of domestic abuse in students and colleagues. He was working with technology companies to create better tools for detecting and preventing online predatory behavior. The fight against domestic abuse and financial manipulation is ongoing, Tyler explained during his latest speaking engagement. Criminals are constantly developing new techniques and exploiting new technologies. Our response has to evolve as well. The work is never finished, but every victim we help and every predator we stop makes it worthwhile. As Tyler and Sarah prepared to welcome their second child, I marveled at how completely he'd rebuilt his life from the wreckage Jennifer had created. The confident father, devoted husband, respected educator, and tireless advocate bore no resemblance to the isolated, manipulated man who'd once been trapped in Jennifer's web of lies. Tyler's story had become proof that love really could triumph over manipulation, that truth really could overcome deception, and that families really could be stronger than any force that tried to tear them apart. Most importantly, it had shown that even the most traumatic experiences could be transformed into sources of strength, wisdom, and service to others. Jennifer Collins had intended to destroy Tyler's life for her own gain. Instead, her criminal enterprise had accidentally created one of the most effective advocates for domestic violence prevention in the country. Her legacy of manipulation and abuse would be remembered only as the catalyst for Tyler's remarkable transformation from victim to victor. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.